Well, good afternoon. I am Sheriff Walt McNeil of the Leon County Sheriff's Office, and it is my pleasure to facilitate a discussion after that great piece we all just enjoyed. And here on the panel, engaged in this discussion, we have the composer himself, Joel Thompson. Let's give him a little round of applause. And also two board members of TSO, Mr. Byron Greene and Mr. Patrick Slevin. So Joel, let's jump right into it. Joe, you wrote that it was the death of Eric Garner that led to the birth of this piece of great music that we just heard. That it was then that you understood, as you quoted, and here's your quote, "The color of my skin is a capital offense," unquote. Tell us more about the emotional experience that led to write this symphony and what you call, quote, "a sonic diary entry," end quote.
Yes, the piece was born of grief, pain, fear, anger, and really those emotions were, I feel, side effects or sort of resonances from a friction between expectation and reality. So when I saw the YouTube video where Eric Garner, his life was being taken, my expectation in that moment was, surely there will be a formal charge, an indictment. The officer will at least plead guilty to at least involuntary manslaughter. A jury of his peers would be assembled and they would figure out how to dispense justice in this situation. But the reality is that America, it seemed to me at that time, that was unwilling to even take that first step. So that the grand jury chose not to indict the person whose actions led to the death of Eric Garner. And so it is in that space that I decided, now I feel all of these things, what is the best way to express that? I can go the easy way, and you know, we've seen the easy way throughout the country right now, from Charlottesville to Ferguson to Berkeley, all from coast to coast. Or I could choose a different way. I could use this craft, this abstract medium of expression that we call music, to explore the nooks and crannies of grief and the anger and the fear that I felt, and to sort of dig in my soul, take it out of myself, look at it, and figure out how to move on from it. So I chose that option, and that's how the piece was born.
All right. Thank you. Now, Joe, you indicated that this was not a piece that was done as an anti-police statement. Can you expand on what exactly you experienced and what you believe this to be about? My intention was not at all to be anti-police in any way. It was really, as I said in the first question, an attempt to explore my own grief in a way that I could then move on from it. Of course, I've received responses to that nature that are not really about the piece itself, but about the circumstances surrounding that piece. But largely, the response has been positive, by and large, and I do believe that maybe most people are following the wise maxim of if you have nothing good to say, don't say anything. But mostly the response has been positive, and I must say that the most positive response to the piece has been this event right here, that Dr. Stringer saw the piece and in a stroke of fearless leadership decided to program this piece in an effort to use music as a way to build community. So I must say thank you to Dr. Stringer and to the Tallahassee Symphony Orchestra.
I must add that when we first learned that the piece was coming to Tallahassee, we in law enforcement had the same kind of concern. Would this be a piece that we could all embrace? And when we listened to it, it impactfully embraces humanity, and that's what we're about in law enforcement. When the question was asked during the song, who takes care of making sure people are protected? And that's us in law enforcement. So it resonates with us as well. Now, the road to bring this symphony right here to Tallahassee today, it started almost 2 years ago. I think that's right. And it was, I don't believe that was a smooth transition for TSO as well. Can Byron, you and Patrick talk about that journey that brought it here?
Sure. It was an arduous journey, but it is one that I think was needed. We sat around the table when Mandy brought the project to us, and there had to be several discussions to make sure that everybody was okay. I believe, just as you said, you know, there is the worry that is this something that's going to be more divisive than something that will bring us together. So there was conversation on both sides of the issue, but we had to kind of have, as we say, had to have a come into Jesus moment and decide, are we going to do this or not? And I must give kudos to the board for deciding to go forward with this project. We were concerned, but you know, nonetheless, there was, you know, we've had some folks who said that, well, I'm not sure about this. But again, in the end, we chose to take the road less traveled. And I will say, you know, voices from people like Patrick on our board, we have a great diversity amongst our board. And Patrick posed some questions to us that made us take a hard look at ourselves, because we wanted to look at it from both sides, not just from the side siding with the victims, but from other perspectives. And Patrick helped us with that. And I believe through our discussions, we were able to bring Patrick on board in a different way. He was always with us, but he was concerned.
How do I follow that up? First off, thank you, Byron, and thank you, Joel, for bringing this here. And when we did have the discussion, you know, let's face it, we live in a divisive society right now, and this is a piece of artwork that is genius. But there's folks out there on the right and left who may want to try to hijack it and use it for their own political gain. And so that was a concern. Why do we want the TSO to be in the middle of that? But the TSO has a mission that I've come to realize, and we'll talk about in a moment, that we want to be more than just good music in a great community. We want to break down barriers and have a collective conversation for the betterment of our community. So that was really a driving force that led me to change some of my perspective, and that has brought me to the stage here today. And I'll stop there for the moment and hand it back off to you, Sheriff.
All right, thank you, Patrick. The getting here, there was a conversation, Amanda Stringer, the executive director of TSO, she wrote, quote, "If we are brave enough to recognize and explore our personal reactions to this powerful piece of music, we come to understand ourselves better," end of quote. Byron, can you share your personal reactions to the piece we just heard?
My reaction is still fresh right now. I listened to the piece some time ago, but I did not want to listen to it too much that I would not be sensitive and have some real feelings. So tonight or this afternoon, listening to it again really stirred some emotions. I think my perspective is that we're all a part of the human fabric, and I take something from an author, Wendell Berry, and he talks about in one of his novels, the beloved community, and he says the beloved, in paraphrasing, the beloved community is imperfect and irresolute. It is held together by the frayed, yet it is always fraying, always disappointed in itself yet always trying to contain its divisions and gentle its meanness, always persevering. And so to me that says that is the promise of the human spirit. And so through this work, in bringing together a dialogue, bringing people together, this community that I see out here just says this is the human spirit right before us. And so that's my feeling about this right now.
Thank you. And Pat, now you come from a family of New York City police officers. And this probably feels personal to you just as it does for me. What do you hope this audience takes away from what we've heard here today?
So now you got a little bit of understanding why I may have had a hesitation. My grandfather was a New York City cop. My uncles were New York City cop cousins. I was a security policeman in the Air Force. We all have friends in law enforcement here in the community. I even have clients who are cop unions. And so when this first came about, my filter was, well, this must be, and concern was, this must be anti-law enforcement. And before I go any further, I think it would be appropriate, we do have law enforcement here with us today. I think if it's all right with you, Joel, let's just recognize law enforcement that is here tonight, and they're putting their life on the line to protect us, please, if you can.
Would the
Stand up,
officers mind
guys.
standing?
Stand, please. Thank you for your service.
Absolutely, and that filter was my knee-jerk reaction. And I think a lot of folks in the community, when they first heard about that, had the same reaction. But something happened. Knowing that this was going to happen and being a public relations person, I say, well, TSO is going down a pathway and there's no return. So I want to work with Byron and Mandy and the board to make this the best venue possible. So as we started working together on messaging and framing and so forth, we had a discussion among ourselves. And Byron shared something that really changed my thinking, and the reason why I'm sitting before you here this afternoon. When we're talking about the subject and the music, Byron shared a personal story where we were talking about when we get pulled over, no one likes seeing those lights in the rearview mirror. No one likes it. But as a white person, I can't relate to what it is to be African American. And Byron shared the story. It's like I get nervous when I get pulled over, more so than what I would. And I found that very troubling and curious and something I wanted to explore further. And at that moment, I had the epiphany that, Joel, your work worked. You know, your piece created discussion within the board. And I really started changing my filter. And it's like, wow, if we can have this discussion of understanding, wow, how can this be a benefit to the community? And so we started working towards it, and at the end of the day, what we're hoping to do here with this great piece, with this genius composer that we are graced to have in our community. It's true. I would just say, let's take the spirit of this music, because it is art. It's not to, everyone has a right to have an interpretation to music and art, and music does bring communities together. It does spark a constructive conversation in a world that doesn't want us to communicate but to fight. So Joel has brought us here together, and I'm very proud to be a member of the board. The board has done this work for your benefit and for all our benefit, and may it continue to live on beyond today.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you. This is to either one of the three of you. Our public conversation on these tragedies seems to require us to pick one or two competing sides as it relates to these kind of issues. Is there any danger in doing that?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Patrick and I, obviously, as he referred, we've talked, and one of the things that, Patrick will tell us, remind us from time to time that, he's Republican, conservative, so forth, so on. But as I said to him, and that's not bad. We need all sides. However, when I see Patrick, I don't see conservative, Republican, white, or anything else. I see him because I know him to be a father. I know him to be a husband. I know him to be a responsible person that cares about this city. And that's what I see first before whatever political differences we may have, because to me that's secondary. So I'm in the business of seeing the human side of everyone. And we all have our opinions. We all have our peculiarities and propensities. However, we're all people first. And then I think we start the discussion from there. We can't have a discussion if we start out by saying, well, he's conservative. Then that's going to shape the conversation. We got to have a human-to-human interaction.
Let's remember that the 7 last words were inspired by the 7 last words of Christ. So when we're taking one side against the other, are we really living the life of Christ? And I think that's dangerous. And here we are in the middle of a concert having a discussion where we're breaking down barriers and we're breaking down the outside world and keeping it from bringing us together. And so we have more in common than we don't. We have more in common as Tallahasseans, Floridians, and Americans. And it's a great feeling to be able to sit here with you, Joel, and let your music inspire us first off, but also to be reflective on the sanctity of life.
Thank you. As we start to bring a close to this conversation, Joel, let me go back to you. You wrote, quote, "When the music is over, let us continue to listen," unquote. What are your hopes for the impact of your work worldwide? And what could happen if we all would open our hearts?
Well, I wish all of you could see what I can see from here. This is what can happen if we keep our hearts open. I see officers who have taken a sacred oath to protect and serve this community here. I see the mother of Jonathan Farrell sitting up there. the strength of a black mother, the strength of a mother, period. Yeah. The strength of any mother. She's here. She's present. I'm seeing, colors of the rainbow here. This is what can happen if we keep our hearts open, for sure.
Thank you, Joel. As we conclude the conversation, Joel, let me tell you, you have been a bright light in our community. We are so glad that TSO decided to bring this composition into Tallahassee, Leon County. I said when I spoke to Amanda that we were not concerned about any kind of outbreak, any kind of concern about people taking this and making it something negative. We knew exactly what we see here today would happen here in Tallahassee, Leon County. And thank you so much for your great work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to say thank you while I'm here to Sheriff McNeil and to Byron, Greene, and Patrick Slevin. Honestly, it's just been an honor just getting to know all of them. And also, I'd like to invite you all to please stay for the second half of the program. I know it's a little bit long, but it's Beethoven 9, and it's going to be the perfect way to follow what we've just heard. The poem by Schiller that Beethoven sets at the end of the symphony has the line "Alle Menschen werden Brüder," all men are brothers, and so it's a perfect way for us to close this evening. So please, after the intermission, please stay and enjoy the work by Beethoven. Thank you.